Welcome everybody to the first ever video of a new video series I was planning on doing for a long time now. It's called Ranking the Gambits. The concept is that we'll take a look at gambits and go through all the plans that are in the positions you might get. This way you are able to learn how to play the gambits for yourself. After that I will rank them on a scale from 1 to 10 based on a couple criteria, such as how good they are from an objective standpoint, their practicality, the difficulty to play it, how fun they are to play, and how many opponents will know about it. Today's video I've chosen to take a look at a gambit I'm very familiar with myself and I have played over the board a few times. It's called the Ticulat Gambit and starts after playing e4 and the opponent replies with the move e6, which is called the French defense. The gambit revolves around playing b3, which is quite an uncommon move but has a lot of venom. After the typical French player plays d5, we gambit the pawn on e4 and play bishop to b2. I'd like to ask you to reply in the comments to say which gambit you would like to see next. Also, if you enjoy the videos, make sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date with all the hottest gambit lines. Now all aboard the gambit train, as I'm going to give you a guide through Ticulat land. Enjoy. The first thing we will take a look at together is what happens when the opponent decides to, after e4, e6, b3, d5 and bishop b2, accept the gambit when they play the move d takes e4. After this move, the plan for white is going to be quite simple. It's going to be to play knight c3 and afterwards queen e2, after which they will most likely win back the pawn and get a very open game. This is usually what French players like to avoid because of their tactical inabilities to play these kinds of positions. They're more comfortable in their own closed little structure that's usually the same in every e4 game. Having played knight c3, however, there are two ways for black to continue. They can really hang on to their pawn and play the move f5, which I find a little greedy. Let's see what happens first if they go for this and how white can exploit this. It all starts by sacrificing a pawn with the move f3. Right now we're going to kind of play this in a Blackmar-Demer type of style. And you'll most likely see that after e takes f3 and knight takes f3, white has an overwhelming advantage in development, but also they're going to be able to win back the pawn if they would like. Black's position will remain very iffy because of the backwards pawn that can easily be attacked by all the pieces. You can put a lot of pressure on the pawn after, for example, bishop c4, knight g5, queen e2, and after you castle queenside, you can also play rook h to e1 to really set up some pressure on the e-file. Now the black camp is still underdeveloped and under a lot of pressure and has to be careful if they want to defend this position. Also, you will keep a weakness on f5 on the long term, which is bad in any endgame. For this reason, I wouldn't recommend playing in this style and just decide not to fight to keep the pawn. The next move in itself is a way to defend the pawn, but after knight f6 and queen e2, there's no way to really hang on to this pawn. You can play queen d4, but you're just walking into the scope of a bishop, so I would recommend not doing that. One of the main lines after knight c3, knight f6 and queen e2 is to play bishop b4 and afterwards try to play queen e7 and try to trade off dark squared bishops after we castle long. After bishop b4, long castles and they castle too, I recommend taking on e4 with the knight. Now in no way, shape or form can black take this knight, because after they take and we play queen takes e4, there's so much threats after bishop d3, h4, h5, h6 ideas. They're just way too strong and black has very tough times to defend this. Another really edgy try for an advantage, however, and I must say it's objectively strong even, it's the move g4. I'm completely in love with these kinds of positions. A lot of black players might panic and play h6 for example, and now the attack is really on. A way it could possibly go is, for example, after h4, really trying to force g5. And after bishop takes c3, d takes c3, queen e7, for some sort of try to neutralize the white position, we can play g5, and this is already close to lost for black. Either the h or g file will open, and together with the bishop on b2, this is almost impossible to defend. We are now back at the starting point of our analysis, where we looked at lines where black takes the pawn on e4. But now, what if black declines the gambit and plays knight f6, for example? We are almost forced to wedge our pawn into the e5 square, and after this the knight most likely moves to d7 and we can reinforce the pawn in two ways. Either with d4, which is objectively blessed, but then why have we played our bishop to b2? I mean, that would be completely pointless. That's just admitting you made a mistake in the opening by fianchettoing the bishop to b2. That's why you want to play f4 in this position. After this, there are multiple ways to go about it. I wanted to show the ones I see most often, and the first one is going for quick castling ideas by black. Bishop e7 does create a bit of a weakness on g7, which we will try to exploit with queen g4. And now it's important not to play knight f3 first, because we want this diagonal to stay open for the queen to go to the king side. After queen g4 and they continue by castling, we can play knight f3, and after c5 we can start going for a kingside attack already with h4. And there's ideas to push the pawn to create weaknesses, and we want to castle queenside again and try to create play on the king side while black plays on the queen side mostly. What you will probably see is that black tries to take as much space on the queen side as possible, while we try to break open the king side and try to attack and checkmate the king. Now, instead of going for a quick castle, they could also play a bit more principled by grabbing more space on the queen side with c5. The plan will remain the same for white, with queen g4 kind of declining black from castling soon because of the bishop being occupied with defending g7. And after knight c6 and knight f3, black might be tempted to play g6 because they want to move their bishop away so they can castle. g6 is a move that happens very often, but this once again offers white the idea to, after, for example, bishop e2 and bishop e7, play the move h4. We want to open files as soon as possible and create play on the king side before black expands on the other side and puts us in trouble. Black is almost forced to play h5 in many lines to really stop this pawn from going forward. And the plan for white is to go, after queen h3, for a g4 push and completely open up the position on the king side. It does require some skill in attacking to make these kinds of positions work, but if you're an attacking player and you love these kinds of positions, why not go for these kinds of gambits? Now, we're going to take a look at the antidote, and the line which makes me a bit anxious to play this gambit against the best of the French players is in the declination of knight f6. The line I will show you kinda gives black a lot of what they want and gives white a balanced but very difficult middle game where black has a lot more space. So when you want to try to play this gambit, be aware of the fact that this line exists. It happens after knight f6, e5, knight f to d7, f4, c5, queen g4, knight c6, knight f3, and now an immediate a6. And this prepares to play b5 and grab a lot of space on the queen side, and you're kind of ignoring the king side for now and fully focusing on the queen side. Theory says that white should allow it and play bishop e2, and after b5, I mean, look at the space that the black pawns have gained on the queen side. After castling and black plays g6, there's going to be a big problem for white. After knight c3 and knight e7, take a look at the square on f5. There's so many pieces for black that can maneuver to better squares, but the white pieces are sort of stuck in their territory. And also, if you try going for a4 to create some kind of counterplay on the queen side, it doesn't work because they can just play b4 and look at the cramped position that white gets. I wouldn't want white in this position at all. I've only seen people play this like a couple of times though, and I've seen a lot of success in the other lines that are played more often. I do think that whenever you play this gambit, a lot of the times you will get better positions and it's more practical than objectively sound. I've made sure to be as objective as possible when rating this gambit, and I split it into a couple of important sub-ratings, which are the objective evaluation, the practical evaluation, how easy it is to play, the fun factor, and the surprise factor. And this is going to be important too, because it's important that the opponent has very little to no prep on the positions that can arise. I've carefully evaluated the gambit and its evaluations, and I came to the following conclusion. For objective evaluation, I give it a 7.5 out of 10. For the practical evaluation, I chose the same. Once again, 7.5 out of 10. Now, the fun factor is of course a bit subjective, but as a gambit player, I give it a 7 out of 10. I wouldn't call the gambit easy to play. It is easy to gain back the pawn if they accept the pawn sacrifice, but if they decline it, it can get positionally pretty tricky. So I give it a 6 out of 10. And now the surprise factor is, it's no surprise to me. I don't believe many French players study this line carefully. I myself haven't looked at it before I just bumped into it for some reason. Some may have never really seen it or studied it at all, so I give it an 8 out of 10. This comes down to a rating of 36 out of 50, and that equals 7.2 out of 10. This is a pretty good rating for the first gambit. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Let me know if you liked the video and what you would love to see in future ones. I hope the video series will catch on to many of you and we can see a lot of engagement from the Chess Chef community. Now don't forget to like and subscribe, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Bye bye.